We're talking about a fine so big, it literally broke records. And it's a story that starts with just one healthcare giant, but it pulls back the curtain on this massive multi-billion-dollar crisis. So today, we're going to unpack a huge settlement that really exposes a fraud epidemic that's been running rampant in California. And just so you know, our deep dive today is based on some incredible reporting from Shasta Unfiltered. They've really been on top of this sprawling story. So here's the number that really set off all the alarm bells. $556 million. That's a huge number. In early 2026, the healthcare titan Kaiser Permanente agreed to pay this, staggering amount to the Department of Justice. And get this, it's the largest settlement of its kind in history, ever. So what did they actually do to get hit with a fine this big? Well, it all boils down to something called risk adjustment fraud.
All right, let's really get into the weeds here because the details of this case, they're pretty eye-opening.
Okay, so here's the basic idea behind the scheme. It's actually pretty simple. The government pays private Medicare Advantage plans more money to cover patients who are sicker, right? It just makes sense. Well, risk adjustment fraud is when a company basically games that system. They systematically make their patients look sicker on paper than they really are. And by doing that, they illegally jack up the payments they get from the government. So here's what prosecutors allege. They said that for almost 10 years, Kaiser was pressuring its own doctors to go back into patient records after a visit and just add diagnoses, often for conditions that weren't even talked about during the appointment. And this practice, they say, illegally inflated their government payments by an estimated $1 billion. And how did this all come out? Well, it was brought to light by insiders, whistleblowers, including one of Kaiser's very own former doctors. And this isn't just some fight between a giant corporation and the government. As the U.S. attorney on the case put it, this is a huge betrayal of public trust. We're talking about our taxpayer dollars. When billions of these public dollars get siphoned away like this, it just corrodes the entire healthcare system. That's money that should be going to, actual patient care. But here's the kicker. This massive $500 million penalty, it's not some one-off thing for Kaiser. Not at all. In fact, it's just the latest, and the biggest, in a pretty consistent pattern of really, really expensive settlements. And look, we're not talking about ancient history here. This is all recent stuff. Just in the last couple of years, you've got a $200 million settlement for failures in mental health care, another $49 million for illegally dumping hazardous waste, and almost $48 million for sharing patient data without authorization. So this Medicare fraud case is the peak, but it's sitting on top of a whole mountain of other issues. And this is where we need to zoom out, because the Kaiser case, as big as it is, isn't just about one company. It's really a symptom of a full-blown fraud epidemic happening in California right now. Just think about this number for a second. $3.5 billion. That's how much fraud they think is happening in just one part of California's healthcare system, hospice care. It's gotten so bad that Los Angeles County has basically become the national hotspot for these kinds of scams. So you might be asking, how did things get so out of control? Well, this chart really shows you part of the story. In the last 10 years, the number of Medicare-certified hospices in California just exploded. We're talking a 7-fold increase. That kind of rapid, unchecked growth, it created the absolute perfect breeding ground for fraudsters to swoop in and set up shop. So now, the state is basically playing catch-up, just frantically trying to weed out all the bad actors. They've already pulled hundreds of licenses, and there are hundreds more under investigation as we speak. Okay, so the problem got so big, so widespread, that it's triggered what you could call an all-hands-on-deck response from the federal government. And back in early 2026, the Trump administration made it crystal clear they were getting involved. The president himself basically declared that a new era of federal investigation into the state's healthcare system had begun. And this isn't just one agency doing one thing. It's a full-on, multi-pronged attack. You've got the Department of Justice running huge takedowns like Operation Gold Rush, which targets these big transnational crime rings. At the same time, Medicare is doing deep audits to try and claw back some of that misspent money. And then you have Health and Human Services who are even using AI to try and spot fraud as it's happening in real time.
So, is any of this working? Well, it looks like these efforts are really paying off. In 2025 alone, the feds recovered $5.7 billion across the country under the False Claims Act. And here's the crazy part. A staggering 83% of that money came from the healthcare sector.
But you know what's really interesting? This whole fight isn't just being fought by government agents in suits. A huge, huge part of this story is about the power of regular people, citizens and journalists who are stepping up and demanding accountability. I mean, just think about it for a second. The whole Kaiser case we started with, it was blown wide open by whistleblowers from inside the company. And they're now going to share something like $95 million from that settlement. And that huge crackdown on hospice fraud, that whole thing was basically kicked off by a massive investigation by the Los Angeles Times a few years ago. And these watchdogs are everywhere now. You've got financial research firms like Hindenburg digging into nursing home chains. You've got citizen journalists like Nick Shirley literally on the ground investigating things like ghost daycares. And then you just have tons of people on social media who jump on every single DOJ announcement, sharing it and making sure the pressure stays on.
So, okay, we've got this record-breaking settlement, a statewide crisis, a huge federal crackdown, and all these citizen watchdogs. So what's the big takeaway here? Why does all of this matter to you?
Well, here it is really. It all started with one massive, record-breaking case that just ripped the lid off this systemic crisis that's costing all of us, the taxpayers, billions of dollars. That crisis, in turn, triggered this really powerful, coordinated response from the government. But I think the most important lesson here is that real change, real accountability, it so often starts with the courage of just one person. A whistleblower, a journalist, a concerned citizen, someone who decides to stand up and protect the integrity of the whole system. Which, of course, leaves us with one final, pretty big question. With federal agencies and all these citizen watchdogs closing in, are we actually seeing the beginning of the end for this kind of easy healthcare fraud? Or are the schemes just getting smarter, forcing the fraudsters to evolve into something new that's even harder to catch?